Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
Welcome back. Hopefully you've had a chance to visit the convention floor to see the exhibits and the exhibitors. We thank the sponsors and exhibitors once again for their support of this event. After a great keynote this morning, and we're already underway in the Fed ID space, we're ready to now have on the Homeland Security side our first panel. Thanks to Computer World Services Corporation for the sponsoring the break and coffee. Hopefully everybody's ready for a great panel. We do have a good panel, a panel that will discuss a topic I know of interest to all here in the audience. And we are very, very happy to have Mr. Frank Cilluffo as our moderator. He's the Associate Vice President at GW University and Director of the Center for Cyber and Homeland Security. Pretty interesting confluence of two topics down there. Been there in terms of that center. They are actually doing great work in publication and representation and convening. So we're happy that we have Frank with us to help convene this particular panel. He's advised government in a variety of roles. Came in quite early, 9/11, with Governor Ridge in the Homeland Security Department. Strategy and policy expertise, published broadly, and is, I think, a recognized, acknowledged expert in the area of cyber and homeland security and strategy. That said, he has a good panel. I'll allow him to make those introductions and turn it over to him. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Frank Cilluffo.
Thank you. Well, thank you for that overly kind introduction. When I try to explain who I am and what I do, I normally use one word: he who displays varying degrees of ignorance in lots of subjects. The good news is we have people who are very aware of pressing issues facing our country. I think the timing is very apt, given just yesterday we are 16 years past the horrific attacks of 9/11. And what I hope we discuss today are some of the actions and steps that have obviously been taken since 9/11, but also more recently. There are a number of executive orders. There are a number of issues that are front and center. And my job, as I see it, is to ensure that we shed a little more light than heat on some of these topics. And they are pressing issues. We have a couple of executive orders that were promulgated recently, some of which are about to sunset or expire at the end of this month, some of the countries of concern and interest. And what I thought we'd do today is have two of the most prominent law enforcement officials and genuine patriots on the front lines of these issues shed some light on the issues. We'll start with Deputy Chief Ron Vitiello. I know you all have bios, but let me just say that obviously CBP's mission is incredibly vast. It's incredibly complex, and I think they often don't get the credit that they deserve. I mean, they really were one of the very first agencies that brought an intelligence-led focus, a risk-based focus to countering terrorism travel, obviously to protect our various borders. And obviously, Ron has been there from the get-go, a genuine veteran with scar tissue, but also someone who's leading the way forward. After that, we'll hear from Acting Director of ICE, Tom Homan, who is also a longtime law enforcement veteran, 33-plus years. And obviously, the mission of ICE is front and center. And Tom will walk us through some of the recent initiatives, executive orders, and again, to try to get to ground truth on a lot of the issues that I think are playing out differently in discussions today. So, Ron, why don't we start with you? If you can maybe pull us through the recent executive orders, what keeps CBP up at night, what you guys are doing right now, some advancements maybe in some of the visa waiver sets of issues, and turn it over to you. So thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Frank. Good morning, everybody. It's an honor and a pleasure for me to be here, especially with our CBP's best partner, ICE. Tom Homan has done a wonderful job in this sort of new era that we're in. Frank mentioned, yesterday being the anniversary of 9/11/2001, and it strikes me, we did a little bit of reflection yesterday, it strikes me about how far along we've come in CBP, in the interagency, in our collaboration and partnerships, and no better demonstrated by the work done in response to Hurricane Harvey in the interagency with the state and locals, with the National Guard, and then now turning to Irma and then having a similar response. And it's a flash of insight about the potential and the improvements that the department has made with FEMA and the whole interagency and how we collaborate and work together. And you can see that play. I'm seeing that play out now for the response to both of these storms. I'm very proud to be part of that. But I guess important part of that is that it gives us and hopefully you all recognition that this department, CBP and ICE and others have a lot of capability that we bring to the anti-terror mission, border security, homeland security, that most of, as Frank said, most of America doesn't get to see it. So this is an opportunity for us to give you a little bit of insight. 9/11 was a defining moment. It produced conditions that created the department, and CBP wouldn't exist otherwise. And so there was a real, if you'll remember, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, everybody talked, Secretary Ridge often talked about when the next attack would be and how we had to prepare ourselves as a nation for that. And so there was a lot of buzz about the unknown and the uncertainty, and then there was all this movement inside of the bureaucracies to make the government more efficient in this anti-terrorism and homeland security enterprise. And that was a really interesting time to be. I was at headquarters then. It was a really interesting time to be here and watch all that movement taking place. And it was really intense for lots of reasons. The threat was not as well defined as it is now. The risks were multitude. And I would just say that we reflect on that time, and we talked about what it was like in January in the department. There was a similar level of tempo and intensity about how we were changing. And so the executive orders, the implementation guidance from the department has really changed the action planning and what we have been spending our time on in the headquarters of CBP, and how the field is interpreting that instruction and what they're giving us back as it relates to requirements. And it's a really different time. It's a good time to be in this mission. We're attempting to grow smartly, and we've learned so much over these last several years, and it's been very interesting. So, as you may have heard, CBP is involved in action planning to build a wall on the southwest border. There's an interesting way that came about to us, Secure Fence 2006, the Congress trying to meet the mandate from the public to secure the border in an effective way, authorized the use of fencing, what we call now wall, to secure the southern border. We put out almost 700 miles in that project. Very different time, very different kinds of investments. We looked at things differently then. The executive order brought us back to two conditions. The executive order for improving immigration enforcement directs us to build a wall on the southern border, and then brings back the concept of operational control of the southwest border. The CBP has struggled with that nomenclature and defining what it is. The President helped us. The implementation instructions from Secretary Kelly, now Acting Secretary Duke, we're much clearer on what it means to prevent all entries at the immediate border. So that action planning is underway. If you talk to the acting chief of the Border Patrol, what we've decided on is personnel, technology, and infrastructure is the way to grow and increase our capability. And but we're smarter about how we understand the threats and targeting within CBP, both at the border and travelers inbound. And when we talk about wall, we talk about impedance and denial. So there are four master capabilities that we've asked our planners to take a look at. So impedance and denial is slowing folks down at the border. Having situational awareness, so queuing technology, having sensors that allow us to know when people are approaching that wall. Rapid mobility and response, being able to get to those locations on the border east and west lateral access along the border, and then access roads to the border itself. And then mission readiness, having the right information, having the right tools for agents to make that response. So that planning is underway. We've asked for some resources that we've been given in 17 to kind of shore up some of the wall that's in place now. And there's a big ask in the president's budget for 18 for about 1.6 billion to add capability centered on South Texas mostly, and then in the Rio Grande Valley, and then some replacement infrastructure in places like San Diego. The learning from 2006 till today, did a couple of visits overseas. Israel is one of the most important ones, where they advised us on how to do surveillance technology. They advised us on how they work with industry. They advised us not to build wall that's dumb. And so smart wall, people used to call it virtual wall back in SBI Net days. But we've learned to put the whole package together. My learning at Border Patrol when I was the deputy chief and then the chief is that we didn't do well in the sustainment mission. We kept being asked to do more. We kept asking for more capabilities. We were sometimes given those capabilities, but we didn't do such a great job at sustaining those capabilities in the long term. And now, so having this opportunity to grow, that smarter growth with the smarter wall is something that is on the top of our minds. And so we're looking at that part of the executive order, and the action planning is underway. We have very detailed requirements through 18, and then we've analyzed all the remaining segments and mileage along the southwest border so that a longer term plan is being evaluated and costed out. But we're very clear on what we think we can do, what we will do this year, and what we will continue to do through 18, dependent on how the funding comes to us. We've also been in the same executive order directed to hire 500 Air and Marine officers, which that recruiting and the announcements are underway, and 5,000 Border Patrol agents. We've done a lot of work in our HR system to get that hiring process as efficient as possible. The very strong direction from the commissioner, the secretaries, and certainly us not to lower standards to bring that number of people in. But we're not keeping up currently with attrition, even with the efficiencies that we've gotten through the hiring process. And it doesn't help, although it's an opportunity for people who are looking to do something else. ICE is hiring at the same time. They do get some of our good people that are trained and are interested and do the mission well. And so there's a little bit of friendly competition for both entry-level applicants and for us to retain and keep our best and brightest. So hiring, and as it relates to in between the ports, hiring and Air and Marine in both of those two locations. And then in the Office of Field Operations, the customs mission at our ports of entry, we're trying to stabilize that workforce. And then you might have heard, there's been a lot of good press about them doing this, finally elaborating on the 9/11 Commission's desire and mandate to do biometric exit for travelers outside of the United States. It is a rare thing in government, in my experience, where you have a mandate that is funded. So people wanted to do biometric exit for a long time. We actually now have the resources to be able to deliver on that. So you have the funding, you have the technology that is caught up to this need and requirement. And then CBP, John Wagner and Todd Owen at Office of Field Operations, they have a good plan to deploy facial recognition technology for outbound screening and all of the air environment, do a pretty good job in pedestrian, outbound, seaports, et cetera. They can do that mission very well. We know what our future looks like as it relates to the technology, and that continues to improve. There's still some work to be done on outbound vehicle for Canada and Mexico. But the populations of people who are on visas exiting in those environments is very different than air. So once they nail down the air and the pedestrian, we're going to be in pretty good shape that way. And then the technology will continue to refresh and get us to outbound vehicle as well. And then we're learning from that technology to be able to use it for inbound screening as well. And so the airports, the airline, the carriers, and ourselves, we're all sort of in this conversation about how this technology can improve the travel experience, both inbound, outbound, and then a couple of the bigger companies want to use it for paperless boarding. So it's all kind of coming together. Like I said, it's a rare thing in government when you have the support from the public, you have this mandate that's funded, and then a real plan that is executable by the government. And we're growing on the, there's two other important executive orders about vetting. You've heard a lot about vetting and what people used to call the travel ban, and the administration's attempt to shore up the vetting procedures for these 6 countries of concern. Lots of different reasons for that, a lot of court action around that. But CBP has, with our partnerships around the world, within government, has a world-class targeting system. We get good information from a lot of places about people who want to come to the United States. And so vetting and targeting are a skill set that we've been involved in for quite some time. There's some direction in that executive order, and then we're looking at government-wide, trying to harmonize what we do sort of in visa vetting and selection, how we understand that data, how those interviews can be enhanced overseas so that when people do obtain a visa, there's more information in the data before they travel to the United States, and the recurring vetting of the National Targeting Center, National Counterterrorism Center. So all of that is being reviewed and enhanced so that that primary application for a visa overseas inbound to the United States looks at more elements in the data so that when this recurring vetting occurs and when people begin to travel to the United States, we're better about security screening. There's also several initiatives as it relates to trade and foreign trade with the United States, and so a couple of the executive orders deal directly with anti-dumping and countervailing duties. As a 30-year Border Patrol agent, I really know how to say those words. I'm not exactly sure how all those systems work, but CBP is directly involved in, with the Department of Commerce, the Department of State, understanding obviously we know a lot about the flows, we know a lot about how to target for trade and how to target for commodities inbound, and there are certain ones that, you know, that industry or different countries, you know, there are risks in all of that. But trade transformation, being able to be more forward-leaning as a government, as a country in trade enforcement and in targeting anti-dumping procedures by industry or by countries, and having a targeting system like we do on the law enforcement side for inbound travelers and inbound trade to look for violations of the Trade Act, and working with Commerce and State and our partners overseas to understand what's in the commerce flow and then how we can best prepare the country to do trade enforcement and protect markets and understand where the balances of trade are and help the industry in the U.S. thrive and compete on a level playing field overseas. I'll just talk about one more thing before we move on. The opioid epidemic it's a problem not only in the United States. We're starting to see elements of its degrading societies in other parts of the world. But CBP is also focused on the task force that the president put together, and then our own work with our foreign partners, with the interagency, in understanding what that threat is, how it comes to the United States, what are the supplements that make that threat work, right? What are the chemicals that are being imported overseas to manufacture these things and then send them, and how they flow to the United States, whether it's, you know, hidden in illicit trade or through the post, express consignment. And so we're looking at all of those elements of the flow into the United States, into Mexico, and then all of the elements, you know, pill presses and precursor chemicals. We're targeting that supply chain, and then obviously contributing post-seizure to investigations and information that we learn on the cartels and their networks, their ability to bring those things to our shores. And so I'll leave it there and hope for some of your questions, and let Tom take it from there.
Chief, thank you. And there was a lot of there, and I definitely want to unpack some of the counter-narcotics issues you brought up, as well as obviously some of the visa waiver and vetting and screening issues as directed by the executive order. But thank you for bringing up the opioid, because at the end of the day, smuggling is smuggling is smuggling, and the convergence of all of these bad actors demand a consolidated approach forward. So I'm glad you brought that up. Tom?
Well, thank you. Two things I keyed on is, Frank, you mentioned ground truth, and it's a pleasure to be here today. I like venues like this because to get the ground truth out, I have to get out and start talking, because you're not going to find the ground truth anyplace else, unfortunately. Ron talked about how things changed in January, and things changed significantly in January. Let me give you a real quick story. I actually retired January 27th. And I was at my retirement party. My office was already packed. All my boxes were home. I was there with my wife and my child at my retirement event. Ron was there and gave an insulting speech. But he actually gave me a Gerber knife that he didn't get back. But after the event, I'm out in the hall. I'm shaking hands, and last guest was there, about 400 guests. It's a great, beautiful event. And last guest was leaving, shaking her hand, and my chief of staff walks up and said, "You have an emergency phone call from secretary." So my wife looks at me and said, "What's that about?" And I says, "He probably congratulated me for 33 years. He couldn't make the event." Well, that wasn't the call I got. The call I got was asked if I would reconsider, and the president let me come back and run the agency starting Monday morning. So I thought about it over the weekend, and I came back. When you get, like I told my wife over the weekend of fighting, I says, how do you say no to a four-star general who's a war hero in his own right and the president of the United States? You don't. So I came back Monday. Unfortunately, I had to give all my gifts back, except for the knife. Since Ron don't work for me, ethics had no rules on that, so I kept the knife. But I'm back. And let me tell you, it's a pleasure to be back. I want to be back and see enforcement get turned back on. So I want to talk about is a few things about the EOs. Where ICE is concerned, there's several EOs, mostly tensions on the interior enforcement, immigration enforcement. EOs could have been written in one sentence. A lot of paper on those EOs, they could have written in one sentence. You will now enforce the laws enacted by Congress. That's what the EOs say. That's my interpretation. No new laws were created, no new laws were written. They simply said there's laws on the books enacted by Congress. We want you to enforce those laws, and that's exactly what we're doing. So the executive orders were to uphold the integrity of the border and to remain a sovereign country. We're a sovereign country. We have immigration laws, and we need to enforce those laws. And for the folks that come to me constantly and don't want us to enforce laws against this segment of people or that segment of people, I say you want to protest our actions in the field, you need to go protest Congress because they need to legislate changes in the law. Once they repeal the Immigration Nationality Act, they'll stop enforcing it. But we enforce law. Our job is to execute a mission within a framework provided, that framework being the laws, the policies, and the budget and the resources. So as a law enforcement agency, that's our job. But since January 22nd, I'll read a few stats off to you. We have arrested more than 97,000 removable aliens through September 2nd. That's a 42% increase over the same time period last year. In addition to the increase in arrests, we've increased detainer issuance, request to a law enforcement agency to hold somebody in custody until we can come and get them when we believe they're in the United States illegally. They have increased over 80%. 80%. Without a doubt, some of the increase in enforcement activity can be attributed to the criminal alien program. That is a division within ICE that concentrates on jails and prisons, those that have been not only here illegally, but they committed yet another crime after they arrived in the United States. Ground truth. Entering the United States illegally is a crime. You won't read that a lot of places. When you enter this country illegally, it is a violation of federal law. 8 United States Code 1325. Me and Ron have prosecuted many people in our career for that. So on top of already violating law and entering the country illegally, one crime, they've committed yet another crime. They're sitting in a county jail or state prison, and we concentrate that. So our priorities under the EOs, I'll be clear, national security threats, public safety threats remain our priority. And I'm going to talk about a few numbers that you haven't heard before that I'll give you in a few minutes that support this. Reentries, that's people that have been formally removed by order of an immigration judge, and they re-enter the country illegally again, which is a felony, 8 U.S.C. 1326. That's a priority. Immigration fugitives are a priority. Those are people who've had their due process, they've been to court, they've had an order from an immigration judge, they must leave the United States. Let me touch on that one, because that's the most controversial part of the EOs. Why do you arrest somebody who's been here 10 years as a USC kid? What are we gaining out of that? We gain a lot. We gain the rule of law. This country spends billions of dollars a year on border security, detention, immigration courts, attorneys, appellate courts, circuit courts, Board of Immigration Appeals. Great taxpayer expense to make sure people that enter this country illegally get their due process. But once that due process is over and a federal judge makes a decision, my job is to enforce that decision. If those final orders doesn't mean anything, if those final orders don't get executed, then there's absolutely no integrity in the entire system. So my answer to those folks that say, why do you remove somebody who's been here for 10 years and they had a USC kid? My answer is they've had their due process. The court of law has spoken. Name another federal law enforcement agency in this country is told to stand down on a judge's order issued from a bench. It's a rule of law. And if we continue to send the message as we did over the last decade, that if you enter this country illegally and you're lucky enough to get by the Border Patrol and you can hide out long enough and have a USC child, you're going to get to stay. If we continue to send that message, we will never control the border. Because you have a magnet. You have a pull factor. And that's what we got to stop. So that's what I'm out there all the time talking. We have to send a clear message. You cannot want to be a part of the greatest country on earth and not respect its laws. You can't have it both ways. When you look at the executive orders, you always talk about transnational criminal organizations, and ICE is concentrating on criminal gangs. We've already arrested over 4,200 gang members this year. Our focus is on MS-13, the most violent gang in the world. And we'll continue to put a lot of pressure on them. There's a lot of discussion on this administration and how we enforce immigration laws, but there's one thing no one can argue. The policies of this administration are working. The numbers on the border are historic low. They went up this past month, and there's reasons I'll discuss for that, but they're still way below what they were over the last 10 years, which shows true interior immigration enforcement will help stem the flow of illegal aliens in this country. You can agree or disagree with the policies. You can like or not like this president, but this president's policy has put the border under more control than it ever has been, and I've been doing this for 33 years. Now, I talked about ground truth. You read a lot of stories. We're out indiscriminately arresting people. Every person we arrest is part of a targeted enforcement operation. We know exactly who we're going to go arrest. We know exactly where we're going to arrest them. If you look at the numbers I gave you earlier, over 97,000. When you look at those numbers and drill down into the data on them, 88% of those people, 88% of those people have a criminal conviction or criminal arrest. That's prioritization. The message we've been sending that no one's off the table. I testified in front of Congress a few months ago, and there's all sorts of stories where Tom Homan says, no one's off the table, and all illegal aliens need to look over their shoulder. I did say that, and I meant that. If you or I go down the highway 100 miles an hour in a 50-mile-an-hour zone, we're worried. We're concerned we may get stopped, get a speeding ticket. If anybody in this room chooses to lie on their taxes, you're worried you may get audited by the IRS. When you knowingly violate the laws of this country, it's not okay to be comfortable. You need to be concerned. You violate a law in this country. You need to be concerned that someone's looking for you. And by keeping to send that message, by me repeating this message over and over again, sends a clear message to those other countries, we're not open to illegal immigration. Don't come. Because if you get by the Border Patrol, there's another agency looking for you. That's ICE. I can't blame anybody for wanting to be a part of, like I said earlier, the greatest country on earth. I can't blame anybody for doing that. But they got to respect the laws of this country. They want to be a part of it, and there's a legal way to do it. This is the most generous country in the world when it comes to admitting immigrants. There's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. No one can fault this country for the number of immigrants that we legally give access. Millions of folks. Sanctuary cities. You see a lot of stories on sanctuary cities, which I personally take offense to. It's not the America I grew up in. That city governments, politicians, choose to knowingly shield those who violated the laws of this country from enforcement. When someone, again, violates the laws of this country and they're sitting in a county jail, they're there for a reason. They're in the country illegally. To shield those folks from the attention of federal law enforcement agencies that is sworn to uphold the immigration laws, to me, it's just plain wrong. And by dangling that carrot of sanctuary cities out there, you are inviting more illegal immigration. I think that's part of the reason you see the numbers increasing a little bit. Because they got this sense, if I can get in the United States to get to one of these cities, I'll be protected. I think sanctuary cities are wrong. I think sanctuary cities, despite the rhetoric out there, increases the threats on community safety. Immigrant communities don't want criminals in their neighborhoods either. So let's talk about the fear in the immigrant community that we get blamed. We're instilling fear in the immigrant community. First of all, as I said earlier, they need to be concerned if they're here illegally. Just like I would be concerned if I'm in another country illegally. I'd be concerned. It's human nature. It should be. But if you really want to tamp down the fear in immigrant communities, then send the right message out there. Stop saying ICE arrests people at hospitals and schools and churches, because we don't. We don't. Well, a lot of these sanctuary jurisdictions are passing local laws now that ICE won't be allowed access to hospitals, schools, or churches. Go ahead and write the law. We don't do it anyways. Our policy is clear. It's sensitive location policy. Now, did we arrest somebody near a school? Yes. Why? Because the county jail doesn't hold them? We got to go find them. NGOs instruct them not to open their doors or cooperate with us, so we have to wait for someone to leave the house. If you're in Los Angeles, New York City, and you got to pull a car over to make an arrest, a solid arrest based on solid information, you pull a car over, chances are you win a block or 2 blocks of a school, a church, or a hospital. That's just fact. So if you want to stop the fear in the community, stop talking about ICE conducting raids and neighborhood sweeps. We don't do it. Targeted enforcement operation. We know exactly where we're going and who we're looking for based on a lot of background investigative work. The flip side of this coin on sending these messages of false hope that drive illegal immigration higher is by dangling these sanctuary city policies out there, dangling this, you get arrested by a local sheriff for a crime, we're not going to cooperate with ICE. The flip side of that coin is that we are lining the pockets of criminal organizations that smuggle these people into the United States. Back in 2003, I was in Victoria, Texas, standing in the back of a tractor trailer with 19 dead aliens and a 5-year-old little boy who suffocated to death in his father's arms. Just recently, you heard about a few other incidents, one in San Antonio. That is why Tom Homan works so hard to send the right message out there to stop the flow of illegal immigrants, because they're dying trying to get in this country because they think they have some sort of safe haven here. The message needs to be clear. And by sending this message that it's okay to violate laws of this country, it's okay to be in this country illegally, more people attempt to come, more people will die. And the criminal organizations, the transnational criminal organizations that smuggle these folks, they're the same organizations that smuggle dope, smuggle weapons, and will smuggle somebody that will do harm to this country, a terrorist. It's all the same illicit pathways. So we got to stop bankrolling these TCOs. We got to take this business out of their pocket. Something you won't hear about. If politicians cared about immigrant fear in the community, they would want me in their jail. They would want me in their jail. Because immigrant communities fear criminals too. And if I can't arrest them in a county jail, in the safety, security, and safety of a county jail, then I'm going to go to the neighborhood and arrest them to their home. And when neighbors see ICE guys in their ICE jackets going to a house to arrest somebody, that instills fear. I get it. If I was in the county jail, that team might not have to be there. More people in a county jail means less people in the neighborhoods. So if you really, really want to tamp down fear in the immigrant community, politicians, then let me in your jail. That's the right thing to do, especially if, on one hand, you're collecting a check from the Department of Justice, help defraying the cost of holding illegal aliens that the Department of Homeland Security can't even talk to. Then they get released. I don't know who they are or where they are. Now I got to go find them. If you look at the recidivism rate in this country, it runs between 40 and 75%, depending on the crime, which means they will re-violate the laws of this country. For every illegal alien that I can arrest in a county jail, in the safety security of a county jail, means a team of officers have to go to a home and arrest a significant public safety threat by knocking on his door. And people want to argue that sanctuary cities improve community safety and officer safety. Garbage. It's a matter of time from when one of my officers knocks on the door and doesn't go home that evening. And shame on those who makes a decision that you can't arrest this guy in my county jail. I'm going to make you go to his home and arrest him. That is why I'm so passionate about this. I read in the media all the time, courthouses. People don't want to arrest aliens in courthouses. A criminal courthouse. Don't arrest a criminal courthouse. I want to be clear in our policy. We do have a sense of location policy in churches, hospitals, schools, and so forth. To arrest somebody in those locations, you need authority all the way up to headquarters. And you can't give me one example where that's happened. Courthouses are not a part of the sense of location policy by design. They're criminal courthouses. I've been in courthouses before where I've seen a father get arrested for failing to pay child support. Judge ordered him arrested by the county sheriff in the room. But people don't want me going to a courthouse to arrest a criminal alien, a significant public safety threat. But it's okay to arrest somebody who doesn't pay the child support. Criminal courthouses, anybody gets in a criminal courthouse has to go through metal detectors, security. It's safe. It's safer for my officers. Why do they have metal detectors security at courthouses? For the same reason that metal detectors and security up on the hill. The last time I testified, they asked me about courthouses. Why do you go to courthouses? I said, well, I noticed I came here to testify today. You know, there's a metal detector security for the safety of Congress and their staffs. Judges have that security in place for the safety of them and their staffs. Why would I not want the same for my law enforcement officers? If I have a chance to arrest a significant public safety threat behind the wire, why would I not want to do that? To protect the men and women, the 20,000 patriots that work for me, that chose every day to get up and strap a gun to their hip, leave the safety of their home and their families to enforce the laws of this country, why not give them a break? And if they can arrest a significant public safety threat in safety, let it be done. The only people we arrest at courthouses are significant public safety threats. We don't arrest fugitives. We don't arrest low levels. We arrest those who are a threat to the community. And I will continue to do that, and I have the backing of the Secretary and the Attorney General. I just want to address that because what you read in the media isn't always accurate. As part of the EOs, we created the Voice Office, Victims of Immigration Crime. I thought it was long overdue. Many people are victimized by illegal immigration. Illegal immigration is not a victimless crime. I often get asked, well, is it true that illegal aliens commit more criminal acts than U.S. citizens? And that's the wrong question. The wrong question is, the right question would be, how many criminal acts would not have been committed that illegal alien wasn't in this country? That's the question. So the tens of thousands of crimes committed by illegal aliens are, in my opinion, a preventable crime. If we truly had true enforcement and everybody stood behind this, then I think that would not only send a clear message, that would answer the question somebody want to ask. As far as recalcitrant countries, there's another issue. I'll close on that. We have an issue with some countries taking back their nationals. So if someone gets convicted of a serious criminal act and they're from one of the countries that we call recalcitrant, they won't take them back. There's a Supreme Court ruling that says after 6 months I must release that person if there's no significant likelihood of removal. Sanctions on some of those 12 countries, we're working our way down. My goal is that there's 0 recalcitrant countries. When there's a national from a country that comes to this country illegally and commits a serious crime against a citizen of this country, that country needs to take them back. Or I do support visa sanctions. Why issue more visas to a country that refuses to take someone back that is their national? It's their issue, it's their problem, they need to take them back. So I'm going to leave with that. I know we'll have questions. So I guess the message I'm trying to get out to the folks is the men and women of ICE are doing a fantastic job, despite the rhetoric. Look, I've been doing this 33 years. I actually started in the Border Patrol. I understand that immigration enforcement is controversial. I understand it's emotional. But we're a law enforcement agency. I'm a law enforcement officer. We swore to an oath to enforce laws of this country, and that's what we're going to do. Do I feel bad about the plight of some of these people? Absolutely I do. I'm human. I'm a father. The 20,000 men and women that work for ICE, they're American patriots by the very fact, as I said, they put themselves in harm's way to protect their communities. They're fathers and mothers and sisters and brothers too. But they have a job to do. So I'm not asking anybody to cut us slack. I'm asking for a little recognition for the 20,000 men and women that put their lives on the line every day for this country. And they shouldn't be vilified for doing it. We won't be bullied and not doing our job. I'm glad to be back. We're going to enforce the law. And that's all I got to say. Thanks.
Gentlemen, thank you. The tyranny of time requires I be a bit of a tyrant. I'll ask maybe 1 or 2 questions, and then I promise to save some time for audience questions. But, I mean, there was a lot there, very eloquently laid out, covering so many issues our country faces. And one of the things that keeps me up at night is the foreign fighter dilemma challenge. And there have been some recent open source documents on how ISIS has been trying to exploit travel techniques in Europe through various different means. And given that visa waiver and Europe's a plane ticket away, what would you say right now from a BWP perspective is working? What tools do we have to pressure? What tools do we have to incentivize? And if I'm not mistaken, the executive order 13780, protecting our nation from foreign terror entry, does require, by the end of this month, to have a worldwide review of the 6 countries of concern. But I understand it's a global review of all various countries. So I guess, Chief, this is primarily for you, but how should we, and it really gets to the teamwork or the lanes in the road between state, CBP, ICE, NCTC, and all the watch list entities and state and local. So how would you gauge that, and what should we be expecting at the end of this month? Without breaking too much news, I'm sure you're not going to go into that direction.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I would say that obviously, like the other executive orders and like this change in priorities for enforcement and getting back to business, as Tom said, we're in the process of action planning about how each of the opportunities that the U.S. government has to interview and or vet potential inbound travelers is being reviewed, and we're looking for and making recommendations to enhance that vetting, looking at things like social media, looking at things like smartphones, those kinds of windows, if you will, into people's background and their activity. And so we're looking at the whole continuum, when someone applies for a visa, when they attempt to travel to the United States. The good news, that's underway, and there'll be recommendations that'll get vetted through the interagency and the changes. But CIS, the State Department, the screening units that ICE employs overseas, and what CBP does both here and abroad, is supportive of the idea that we can strengthen vetting as it relates to foreign fighters. And the key to that is our relationships overseas. So we've worked with many countries in this hemisphere, in Europe, in the Schengen zone, and in the routes toward the United States to provide them systems, information, and have an exchange of what they know about their travelers, and then what we can agree to share with regard to our techniques, tactics, and procedures to vet people fully, and then watch travel that may not be coming to the United States, but it's coming into the hemisphere, or is coming from, places in Europe to conflict zones. So we're working with our foreign partners to map that travel and determine where those threats are, and improve our screening for those people.
If I could add to Ron is exactly right, and we are hip to hip with CBP on this issue. We have a visa security program in 41 posts around the globe. We're looking to extend that to other countries, and that's all based on intelligence. Where do we want these visa security posts at? And what we do is the vetting, the social media, and all the vetting we can do, so the Department of State can be supplied with information. So when this person comes in for the interview or visa, we've supplied Department of State on all the derogatory information we could find, or the lack of derogatory information, whatever. Another thing we're working on together with the Targeting Center with CBP is continuous vetting. Once they get a visa and enter the country, the vetting shouldn't stop. What are they doing 6 months from now? What are they involved in 6 months from now? That's a big piece of this. So, as Ron said, we're attached to the hip end. This is a major issue that we're both attacking with a lot of technology and a lot of money.
And can I also ask just a follow-up on that? I'm aware that you're sharing a number of watch listing light type information with a number of countries, and some of those countries aren't taking advantage of all of that information. Is that a correct assessment?
I think there's varying degrees of, we treat privacy in the United States a bit differently as it relates to the privilege to travel, if you will. In Europe and other places, they look at that passenger name record as a privacy issue, even though the government doesn't necessarily collect it. It's collected by the companies. Some of those are foreign-based, and some of them are U.S.-based, et cetera. And so the work there is on the diplomatic side to get them to understand how they can minimize threats in their own hemisphere or within their own borders, and then provide our best practices on how to vet some of that information and keep it private, right? We don't want to be the big brother in this outfit. We want to be able to ensure the safety and security of the U.S. homeland by vetting travelers inbound, but we want to deliver that capability to other countries that need it as well.
So another, as we sort of see the convergence of threat actors, drug studs, and the like, there was a recent indictment of prominent Islamist preacher, Abdullah al-Faisal, in the Caribbean. And there's been some concern historically that Trinidad, Tobago, and some of the other Caribbean countries are a potential gateway. Is that something that keeps you up at night, or is it more focused on the immediate neighbors to the south?
Well, I think, it's both, really, right? There's illicit pathways. We're well aware of those pathways.
And they're the same pathways by and large, right?
Yeah, and what we're trying to do, along with CBP, we're pushing the borders out. Here's Secretary Kelly, then Secretary Kelly talked about the away game, playing the away game more than the home game. So pushing those borders out. We got vetted units all over Central America and some countries across the globe, working with in-country officials that are vetted through our own systems, trained by us, to work at these organizations where they start. Let's not wait till them to get on our southern border to attack these organizations. Let's use our transnational criminal investigative teams, TCIUs, down south and start working them at the origin of the criminal activity. Look at the money. Look at how's the money flowing? Where's that money flowing to and from? Just like MS-13 I mentioned a while ago, there's a large enforcement operation going on right now in El Salvador with our people in the El Salvador National Police, trying to dismantle the part of the organization down there, attacking the money, attacking the infrastructure. So that's a great plan. Push those borders out and work them down south before they get here. And when it comes to even immigration enforcement, you know, the country of Mexico, I think Ron would agree, country of Mexico last year helped us greatly by arresting a lot of Central Americans on their southern border. So continue pushing those borders out for both, you know, immigration issues and terrorist activity. I mean, that's a smart plan, and that's what we're working on.
Yeah, just in this particular environment, in this arrest, in the indictment, we will work with the arresting agency, the FBI, to understand that sort of the pattern of life of that individual, and we will use the data that CBP, the State Department, has in our sort of vetting procedures, our vetting information to enhance their awareness of who this person is and their associates, whether they're in this region or overseas.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to the audience. Tom, I am happy you highlighted JIADF South. It is the ultimate model of cooperation between various federal, state, local agencies, law enforcement, and non-law enforcement entities. So thank you for bringing that up. We have time for one or two quick questions. If you can please, question over here. Tom.
Hi, Tal Copen with CNN. Good to see you guys again. Director Homan, you mentioned this. There was an uptick at the border this month. We've actually seen several months of these slight upticks, and the line is starting to approach not 2016, but certainly some of the numbers in the past 5 years. So my question is, one, were you saying that you think sanctuary cities and that sort of publicity is part of that? And two, if those numbers continue on this trend, what does that mean, and what actually can be done to bring them back down?
There's a couple of things we're doing. We got some ongoing operations they've already been publicized. I don't mind talking about them. Operation Border Guardian. For those families who got their due process and been ordered removed, we're seeking them out. We're going to remove them. Of course, we take out hits on that. You're arresting a mother and a child. Well, the mother and child enter the country illegally. They got a final order from the judge again. If we don't execute those orders, no integrity in the system. So gearing up those removals and start, you know, putting these folks on planes, getting them back home is going to send a message to Central America that you can spend all your money, put your family at risk, and come to this country, but if you get order removed, you're going to remove. We got to stick to that. We got to live by that. That we're going to enforce the law, and we got to. Again, sanctuary cities is part of it, and no one can convince me otherwise. When there's cities saying you're welcome here, we're a welcome community, we're not going to work with the federal government. You can even be arrested and be put in a county jail. We're not going to work with the government. That helps to drive illegal immigration. We're doing an event next week with some of the Central American countries' media, and I'm going to try to explain to them what I've seen in my 33 years. Don't take that trip. People are dying. Ron will tell you, I think they've saved over 2,000 lives just this past year. In my years in immigration enforcement, I said I was in the back with 19 dead aliens who suffocated to death in extreme heat. I've seen aliens bound and gagged by the smuggling organization. Women have been raped. Children have been sexually abused. I got ream of paper in my office of people that have died crossing this country illegally. These criminal organizations, all they care about is the bottom line. They care about the money. Don't put your family at risk for these criminal organizations. Another thing we're doing, we're going after those that have their kids smuggled into the United States, the UACs. You got a parent in this country who is paying an alien smuggling organization to smuggle their child up here because they claim they're escaping fear and persecution. If they're in fear and persecution, what's that parent doing here? He should be down there. But if you're going to hire an alien smuggling organization to smuggle your child up, you're going to be held accountable. We got an operation now. We're targeting them. We're going to charge these people with crimes. It's against the law to smuggle people into this country. And the reason we're doing this, again, send a clear message. You can't hire a criminal organization, put your child at risk, and go to this journey because there's going to be an end game. There is going to be a final decision made by an immigration judge, and if you're found removable, you'll be removed. If you entered into a criminal conspiracy, put your child in harm's way, you're going to be prosecuted. Lastly, for those UACs that come up unaccompanied alien children, the sponsors and the parents of those children will be put in proceedings. You cannot hide in the shadows. You can't be an illegal alien in the United States, have your undocumented child smuggled at the hands of a criminal organization, and stay in the shadows. We're going to put the parents in proceedings, immigration proceedings, at a minimum. If we can't prosecute them, they're going to at least be put in immigration proceedings if they have an immigration issue in the United States. Again, is that cruel? I don't think so. Because if that child is really escaping fear and persecution, he's going to stand in front of an immigration judge to plead his case. His parents should be standing shoulder to shoulder with them. I call that parenting. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep sending that solid message.
Failed my job as timekeeper, but for very good reason. Please join me in thanking two incredible professionals, law enforcement officers.